Alright guys, we are back in my garage for another video, and today we are going to be upgrading the front sway bar on my F3340i. I went with an H&R front sway bar, and I want to give a huge shout out to them for partnering with me on my build. This is going to help reduce body roll and give the car more traction at my next track day, so this is really going to be a big improvement that I've been waiting on. Now, I will also be doing a rear sway bar upgrade on my car, so I'll have a link down in the description when that video is posted if you guys want to see how to do the other side as well. But in this video, we're only going to focus on how to do the front sway bar. So hopefully you guys find this video useful.
Now, as always, for everybody that's new to the channel, I create these videos to help keep you updated on the latest developments in our community, as well as discuss technical topics so that we have a better understanding of how our engines work. So if you're interested in more videos like that, be sure to subscribe because there will be a lot more coming out in the future.
So the first thing we need to do is jack up the car. I have both the front and rear jacked up because I'm doing some other service at the same time, but you should probably be able to get away with just jacking up the front, and then you're going to remove the front wheels. Again, we got to get under the car and access a lot of the suspension components, so remove the wheels so you can access those. Now, we are going to be lowering the front subframe, so you need to support the engine. I recommend getting an engine support. It basically uses this hook through the lift point on the engine, and you can see I just ran a chain through the hole. Make sure everything is secure and jack it up. Now, you're not actually lifting the engine, you just want to make sure it won't lower down. Next, you're going to go under the car and remove all of those 8mm bolts that are holding your under tray on. And then above that, there's this hard plastic shield covering the steering rack. So there should be 3 8mm bolts, and you'll remove those as well. Now, at this point, you need to make sure you disconnect your battery because we are going to be unplugging some electrical connectors. The first thing that we're going to unplug is this red connector, the power for your steering rack. Unfortunately, this was pretty frustrating. It didn't come off easily for me, but you need to pop out the red tab and then squeeze it in, and that should allow you to pull the harness off. As you can see, I'm fighting with it a little bit, but it should come off pretty easily for most people. And then we've got this second connector that we need to remove. Again, it was being a pain for me, so I had to use a pick tool to get it off. But just take your time, squeeze it in, and you should be able to pull it off. Now we need to remove the harness from the subframe. So there are a couple of these little push pins. Grab a trim tool, and you should be able to pop those off. And you work it all the way down the length of the subframe to get the wire fully removed. And we're going to do it on the opposite side as well. This coolant line is clipped onto the subframe, so same thing. Use your trim tool to pop out the little push pins, and then just leave the coolant line loosely disconnected from the subframe. Next, we're going to unscrew the motor mounts, and there are 3 eTorx bolts underneath that are holding the motor mounts onto the subframe, so remove each of those bolts. And now we need to disconnect the sway bar from the end link, and this is a little bit difficult, especially if your car has been driving through winters and stuff and has any rust, but this tends to be one of those bolts that becomes really difficult to remove. You're going to need a T30 counterhold and then a 16mm box wrench on the actual nut, and then just loosen the nut. If you need to, use a little bit of penetrating lubricant, some PB Blaster or something, but take your time to break that nut free, and then you should be able to fully remove it so that the sway bar is loose. Next, we need to remove these forward mounting bolts for the subframe, and to access them, we're going to remove this trim behind the front bumper. There are some 8mm screws along the back as well as underneath the bumper, so loosen all of those to pull this trim down and out of the way. And then this is what those bolts look like. It's basically holding the subframe onto this aluminum bracket at the front, so you're going to get a long extension and squeeze it back there, especially if you have like the track pack heat exchangers. It's a little bit difficult to access, but you should be able to get a 13mm socket on it and go ahead and remove that bolt. Now, believe it or not, one of the fender well screws actually goes through the subframe as well. So it's this single Torx screw, and you need to remove that because, as you can see, if you remove it and you pull the fender liner out of the way, it goes straight into the subframe. It's just kind of a weird option BMW went with on this one, but either way, this needs to be removed in order to lower the subframe. Next, you're going to remove a couple more accessories. So we have this ride height sensor that's attached onto the lower control arm. So use a couple flathead screwdrivers to pop that off. And there are also a couple extra clips holding this wiring harness onto the subframe. So again, just work your way down, make sure that's fully disconnected. And then we need to unscrew the steering column from the steering rack. So there is a single eTorque screw. You can see it up here through this little crevice in the subframe. It's actually easier to access it if you go from on top of the steering rack with like a socket wrench, but basically that needs to be unscrewed. Make sure through the entire process the steering wheel is not moved at all, so that way the steering can stay straight and you don't have any issues when you reconnect it. Now, before you lower the subframe, you want to make sure that it's supported so that you can lower it in a controlled manner. So I recommend jacking up your jack to support it along the center beam in the middle of the subframe, so that way it doesn't drop unexpectedly. And then we need to address a couple bolts on the subframe. So there are two at the rear in this location underneath the trim. There are two in the middle, one on each side. There are these eTorque bolts. And then again, towards the front, there are two more in this deep well. You're going to need like a deep socket or a long extension to get in there, but those are eTorques as well. Now, the ones towards the front, you're going to fully remove, but the one towards the rear, you just want to lower it so that the subframe can drop down slowly without completely disconnecting from the car. So here you can see I'm basically jacking up my jack to support it in the middle. And here's what I did with the bolts. So for the two rearward ones, do not fully remove them. You want to loosen them about 3, maybe 4 full turns, and that will give you enough room to lower the subframe as much as you need. And then the middle 2 bolts I fully removed, and the front 2 bolts I fully removed. And that will allow the front of the subframe to lower so that we can access the sway bar. Now, when I first lowered it, it didn't come down very far. I got a little bit of feedback that it helps to just pull it down a little bit because it seems to get hung up on that aluminum bracket towards the front of it. Or you can use a crowbar and wedge it in between that crack so that it can push the subframe away a little bit and give it a little more room to lower down. And here you can see how far the subframe came down. So yeah, I definitely needed to pull it down more in order to get the sway bar out. But next we're going to remove the nuts that are holding on the sway bar bracket. And you can see where they are kind of here. It's actually easier to access it from under the car, but it's just easier to see from this view. So get under the car with a socket wrench and you should be able to loosen both of those bolts. Although I will say on the driver's side, it's extremely cramped because of the AC condenser. So if you have a ratcheting box wrench, that'll be the easiest way to get those bolts off. Now, I've seen a couple different methods on how to remove the sway bars. Like I said, in my case, I was able to pull down the subframe more, so I literally just pulled everything directly out on the passenger side. However, if you don't have enough space to do that, or it's getting stuck, some people have also mentioned that they basically push it to the passenger side until the driver's side of the sway bar can be lowered down in the middle, and then they remove it from underneath the car. So it kind of goes out to the left, lower it down, and then pull it out to the right. So do whatever works for you. So here's how the sway bars look side by side. Obviously the H&R bar is bigger. It's actually the biggest solid sway bar on the market. So definitely a nice upgrade. And you can see we go from 1 to 2 holes. So this one is adjustable. That way you can adjust if you want the bias to be more forward or rearward in the car. Another nice thing is you can see these bushings are basically made of a composite, and on the inside it has this material that prevents it from making any noise, so there's no need to grease these bushings or do any service. It'll be noise free as long as you have it installed. So let's go ahead and put it in the car. And now you can finally see just how far I was able to pull that subframe down. So that definitely made the job a lot easier, and I highly recommend lowering it as much as possible. And then I just fed the sway bar in the exact same way I removed it, pushed it in from the passenger side, kind of took my time going under the car and on both sides to make sure it cleared all the subframe components, and then got the mounting brackets installed. Now these are very tight. It's a very tight fit, and I ended up using some C-clamps to kind of hold it in place. If you have a friend that can help hold it down, that might help as well, but It's just a very difficult thing to get it fully seated, so just be prepared for that as well. And then the installation is just the reverse of removal. I'll put all the torque specs down in the description so that you guys know how hard to tighten everything. And yeah, you should be able to immediately feel the improvements from this upgrade. So I'll talk about it more in a future video for you guys that are interested in some of the details. But for now, I think that's it for this video. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope this helps. And if you have any other questions or comments, leave them down below.